Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do what we call a soil texture by feel. Now, soil texture is an extremely important property of soils. It tells us all kinds of interesting things about soils. It determines how many nutrients get stored in a soil. It determines how fast the soil pH changes over time. The texture helps us figure out if the soil is going to be well drained or poorly drained. So there's lots of properties that are affected by soil texture, so it's an important thing to know. Now what I have is I have a flow chart that I'm going to go through that will be available online, and there's 3 different tests that we're going to do. Test number 1 is called a cast test. Test number 2 is called a ribbon test, and then the 3rd test is a little bit messy, where you have to use lots of water and lots of soil. So what we have here is we have a soil that I've collected, and there's a couple things that you want to do to the sample before you actually do the tests. You want to make sure there's no stones. A stone is considered anything bigger than 2 millimeters in diameter, so get rid of all the stones. You want to get rid of any bits and pieces of organic matter, so roots, sticks, whatever, you want to get rid of those because texture is only measuring the size of the soil particles. Okay? So organic matter is not included when we're talking about soil texture. And when they actually do a soil texture in a lab, they get rid of all the organic matter out of the sample by oxidizing all the organic matter, so there's absolutely no organic matter left. We can't do that out in the field, and it's really not necessary, because really this field test is strictly used to get an estimate of the texture. This is one of those instances where close enough is perfectly fine. And so we're going to get close enough today with the soil texture. And so I've pre-wet this sample, and what you want when you're wetting the sample, if it's dry or if it's wet, is you want the consistency of plasticine. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up and start kneading it. The reason why I knead this, just like you knead dough, is to break up any clumps. So you want to break up all the clumps that are in the soil, all the aggregates that are in a soil, and you need enough soil to cover the palm of your hand. Stone, so we don't want that. And so, there, I've got this pretty much where I want it to be. So you can see this formed a nice little ball. It's the consistency of plasticine. I can squeeze it, leave a thumbprint in it or a fingerprint, and that's about right. Now some soils you can't put your fingerprint in, but you want the consistency of plasticine, red dough, that type of thing. Okay, so the first test we're going to do is called a cast test. Okay? A cast test is where you take the soil, put it in your hand, and you squeeze it. And you see if you can form something that looks like this. It's called a cast. And if it sticks together, then that eliminates one soil texture. That means it's not a sand. If it does not stick together ever, if it will not stick together, then it is a sand soil. And you'll see that in the flow chart. Okay, the second test is called a ribbon test, and that's the one where we really start differentiating what the soil is going to be like. So what I do when I do a ribbon test is I take the ball of soil and I make it a cigar shape. Okay, so I make a cigar shape with the soil, and then you take the cigar, put it in your fingers like this, and you start squeezing the soil with your thumb, and you're making a flat ribbon that you're pushing over your index finger. Okay, so you take that soil, you squeeze it, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to form a ribbon. The longer and thinner a ribbon you can make, okay, that means there's more clay. Now that ribbon got to be about 5 centimeters or so before it broke. And so if I look at my flow chart, it says that, does the soil form a ribbon? Yes, it formed a ribbon. Okay, and then was it less than 2.5 centimeters in length? No, it was more than that. And the next option was between 2.5 and 5. It was about 5 centimeters. So we're on kind of the borderline. And the other one is greater than 5 centimeters. So we're sort of on the borderline. And so the third test will help us determine what, where we're going to go. So we're going to take a small bit of soil, a small pinch, so a tiny bit. I'm going to put it in the palm of my hand, and then I'm going to take my water and excessively wet it. So in other words, you make a little pool of water in your hand, put the soil in the middle, and then you start rubbing around, rubbing that soil with your finger. And you're feeling for one of three sensations. You're feeling for grittiness. Okay? Grit means it's got sand. There's a little bit of grittiness in this, but not a whole bunch. You'll feel for smoothness or neither. Okay? This is just a little bit of gritty and really not much else. So it's mostly neither. So in this case, the soil feels quite smooth. Okay? And following along on my little flow chart, and when you read the flow chart, you'll see this says a silty clay, okay? Or a silty clay loam. And that's what this is. So we're getting that ribbon that's 5 centimeters or maybe a little bit bigger. Okay? And we got a very smooth feel. And so it's a silty clay loam in this case. Now, if I said this was a silty clay, or if I said this was a clay loam, that's close enough. Because in reality, a silty clay loam, a silty clay and a clay loam all behave pretty much the same in the environment. So if you're trying to manage it, trying to work it, plant something into it, it all behaves more or less the same. So we got close enough, silty clay loam, and that's what we have. So that's how you do a soil texture. Get rid of the stones, get rid of the roots, get rid of the organic matter, get it to the consistency of plasticine, squeeze it to make a cast. If it makes a cast, then you try to make a ribbon. If it makes a ribbon, you look at how long the ribbon is, and then you saturate, you put a lot of water in the palm of your hand with a small pinch of soil and rub it around to feel for grittiness or smoothness or just what it feels like. That's how you do a soil texture.